I thought I'd go backwards in time a little bit. When I was a boy, the Second World War was on, so you know that you're talking, I mean, that your speaker is an old fart up here, but anyway. But I was just a little kid, but anyway, this was a roller rink. And I remember all the GIs that used to come here and roller skate when they get off the base. And in those days, they couldn't wear anything but the uniform. I always had to have the uniform when they went off base. So that was my early memory. But the building that we see here was a school at one time. It was one of these for-profit schools like Intel or whatever. Anyway, it was one of those schools, and they needed more space, and so they built across where the parking lot is now. That was all building there. Well, I don't know what happened, but anyway, the building was foreclosed on, and the Lakewood National Bank, which later became part of Chase, they had the paper, and so Ed Rudolph and I got together, and we bought it. And first thing we did was tear down the building where the parking lot is now. We tore that down and salvaged the lumber, and then Salvation Army wanted to put in a resale store here, and I was opposed to it. And about that time, the Business of Arts Center, which wasn't really in existence, but there was a man in Manitou by the name of Paul Enneman. And prior to Paul Enneman, and I'm sorry that I can't remember her name, but years gone by, long before the Business of Arts Center, I used to meet once a month or sometimes more often with Bud, with the Manitou Dulcimer shop. And so we'd meet upstairs, park in the back and walk up the back stairs, and we'd have the room there. And we talk about economic development for Manitou, and scratch our head and trying to figure out which ways. Anyway, there was a gal there, and I can't remember her name. She worked for Mountain Bell, and she had a good job. She was a really a bright lady, and she wrote a grant request to Mountain Bell. And the grant request was to determine what it is that Manitou should be. And whoever was the author did a tremendous job. And they talked about Manitou doesn't need a grocery store. Manitou doesn't need a hardware store. What Manitou needs is to reflect on its past and think about what they did so well, and that was health and arts. And that's what they should focus on. Well, sadly, that report sat on a shelf in the city hall for a long time, and then Paul Enneman came along as a city planner. And Paul saw that and read it and took it to heart and really did something about it. Not only did he do something about the planning, but he and his wife, they liked to take hikes, and there's a trail there. It was in a state of terrible disrepair. And he and his wife would spend Saturdays and Sundays working on this trail. And other hikers would come along and say, well, what are you doing? He said, well, we're trying to rebuild the trail. In no time, there was 20 people working on this trail, all because of the example that they set. So anyway, Paul was a special guy, and as you know, he died tragically in an automobile accident heading to New Mexico for a conference, and his wife was expecting a baby by the time, and when the crash occurred, she tried to say, she tried to keep the crash away from herself and the child, and broke both of her arms, and so he had a hell of a time. But anyway, the boy saw Zach. He is a great young man today, and so we're forever grateful, and I'm so thankful that this gallery is named in Paul's memory, because he is certainly deserving. Ed and I acquired the building and really didn't know what the hell we were going to do with it. It just thought it was a good buy, and we'd fix it up and do something with it. And then along came this idea of the Business of the Arts Center. And I had been to Washington, D.C. a number of times, and I was enthralled with the torpedo factory. So during the Second World War in Alexandria, Virginia, they built this enormous concrete structure. And the columns were concrete, like, and they go up like this. So this was a huge, huge building right on the waterfront. And anyway, that became an art center, a creative center for artists. And they had their own little studio, and they used to sell out of their studio. So the weekends, artists were always there on the weekends, and they were there a lot of the time, and became very well known. It became the model, as it were, and so that's kind of what this facility was mirrored after that. In our early years, they had a board, and Ed and I weren't on the board, but we were very much involved. But anyway, they hired an executive director, and it took a long time to get the plans drawn. And then it took quite a while to get the place built. And during the course of construction, I drove past here one winter morning, and I saw all the windows were fogged. Immediately, I knew what had happened. The water lines had burst. And so this beautiful hardwood floor, and it was actually banked in places, was just like ocean waves, And so the whole floor had to be taken out and redone. So it took a lot longer. And the gal that they hired was from the Cleveland Museum of Art. And the Cleveland Museum of Art, anytime they need money, they just pull open a drawer and take some, And here she is out here in Manitou, so they hired her, and they had to pay her every month, even though she wasn't doing anything. And before she had so much time at home, she got pregnant, but. So then she had maternity leave, and by that time she just said, to hell with it, I don't want to do the job anyway. So we didn't have enough money to finish the back end of the building. So this was supposed to be a continuation all the way around. See, like a nice walkway, a little studio here and there and everywhere. Didn't have enough money, so we had to forget that. But in any event, it was a long, drawn-out procedure, and I'm so proud to be part of Manitou Springs, and proud to be part of this organization, and so proud of Natalie, what she's doing, and Kelly. The two of them are like twins. They're inseparable, and they work horrendous hours, and they've accomplished a whole lot. And they're just beginning, so there's great things in store ahead of this. I also like to tell you a little bit about Manitou years ago. I lived in Chicago for 8.5 years and came back, and I got I was delivering beer on a beer truck, and one night they asked, they needed a bartender for New Year's Eve, and I was trying to make some money. My wife was very disappointed with me, but that's not unusual at the time. But anyway, I was trained by the Jesuits and I flunked out of law school after a couple of years, and I'm driving a truck on a keg route. But anyway, this bar was for the owner says needed a bartender for New Year's Eve. Well, I had worked at bars at New Year's Eve, and I had been in bars on New Year's Eve myself, and so I understood what that was all about. So he wanted to pay me $25. I said, pay me $50 and I won't touch the till. And or else I said, I'm not your guy. But anyway, so he finally paid me the $50, and I thought, this isn't a bad deal, this little place. And so I told my father I wanted to buy that bar, and this guy was losing it anyway. And so I told my father I wanted to clean the place up and really clean it up and have a neat place. I wore a bow tie every day, and a white shirt and a nice vest. Apron. And I told him I want to serve martinis and Manhattans and nice drinks where people will come and before a movie or whatever and have a drink or two. And my father, God love him, he listened to me patiently. I said, "What do you think, Dad?" He says, "I think there's a lot more people drinking shots and beers than there are martinis and Manhattans." And I'm forever thankful that I listened to my father. But at that time, this is prior to the hippies. But at that time, seriously, at that time there were a lot of enlisted retired servicemen, master sergeants and so forth. But most of the stores were vacant in the winter. I mean, they weren't vacant, they were hanging on by a thread. And going to the city council in those days was just, everybody ran out and to take a look at the new pickup truck that they were buying, and whether, it was just it was really difficult, very, very difficult. Anyway, so Manitou didn't enjoy this great reputation that it does today. It really didn't. And I think, you talk about the hippies, I think they owned a lot of the gratitude for what they did, bring it to Manitou. But anyway, Colorado City had more tourists than Manitou did. And the rents were highest in Colorado Springs. They were next highest in Old Colorado City. And then Manitou, you could rent anything for hardly anything. And so what a change has taken place. What a change. And I think that Dan Stewart was the first one that really made a change in the city council and the attitude and the whole thing. And without Dan Stewart and Ben Kuckel and a few others, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be where we are today, because they're the ones that really had a huge role in this establishment and really started promoting Manitou for what it's really worth and what it's all about. So I urge you to come, urge you to be a member, and you have a choice this evening. You can write a check to the Manitou Arts Center, or you can give it to the United States Internal Revenue Service. And at least you'll know it's being spent wisely if you write a check to this organization. And God knows what what the taxers are going to do, what they're going to do with your taxes. So I would urge you before you leave to think about it and write a check. So this place and artists who come here, and those, not only just artists, but there's all kinds of things going on here. I mean, they've got a preschool going on. There's just things going on constantly. You can take a look at the webpage and see it's just phenomenal. So it's a great organization, and it's wonderful of all of you to be here. And it says an awful lot about who you are and why you're here, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.